Good evening and welcome. Tonight I'm going to be reading to you some articles out of History magazine. And as you can tell by the title and these articles I've laid out for you, we will be once again talking about the Roman Empire, but very specific aspects of it. We're going to talk about triumphal arches. We're going to talk about some of the causes of the fall of Rome. And we're also going to read in this issue about an archaeological site from Roman times in Rimini. Now, these articles were chosen by my channel members. And a lot of members wanted to hear about Rome, which is very exciting. These articles were chosen by Good Girl Gone South, Chris W., Alex, OK Commuter, Luna, Cappy, Marta, Craig, Maxima, Victoria, Alessia, and Laura Cladworthy. Thank you all so much for choosing these articles. So many of you wanted to hear the Roman ones. And if you would like your name in a video when you pick out a History magazine article, you can click the join button right down there. Or if you're on mobile and it's not there, you can click the very first link in the description box. It is only 99 US cents per month. It's the cheapest option you can possibly make it. Because I don't want to charge you guys an arm and a leg for bonus features like picking History magazine articles, getting your name in every video at the very start, getting access to my videos before the general public. Like there's lots of different perks. Even exclusive videos that my channel members pick the topics. If you want to request a certain topic, you have to be a channel member and you get an ad-free video about it. So yeah, I'd love to see you join our little club there. But why don't we get right into the articles, because we have a lot to read tonight. Let's start off with triumphal arches. And sorry for the glare of the lights. There's nothing I can do about it. It doesn't matter what lights I use. It's the glossiness of the pages. It's going to reflect all light. So that is on History magazine, not on me. But here we go. Temples functioned as sites of worship, and the Colosseum served as an amphitheater for games and spectacles. But triumphal arches, such as the Arch of Constantine, were remarkable for being among the few purely symbolic buildings erected by the Romans. With their decorative sculptures, reliefs, and inscriptions, these monuments provide a wealth of historical sources to researchers, and their excellent state of preservation has secured them pride of place in the collective memory of many generations of scholars, travelers, and politicians interested in the ancient Roman Empire. The Triumphal Arch originally grew out of the Triumphal Parade, a ceremony integral to life in the Roman Republic. These lavish processions through Rome were a way for generals and their soldiers to celebrate their military victories publicly. The general who had won a just war was entitled to a pompa triumphalis, paid for by the Senate. Members of the Senate, followed by chariots filled with the spoils of war, would lead the processions through the city, finishing at Capitoline Hill. Prisoners trudged in chains before the victorious general, who stood as he rode in a chariot. The triumph culminated with a banquet and games for the whole population, festivities that could last several days. Celebrating a win. Victory processions entered Rome through a gate in the city wall, the Porta Triumphalis. On passing into the city, the victorious general officially lost his imperium, the full military executive authority granted to him at the beginning of the war. Crossing this threshold symbolically ended the military conflict. Over the centuries, the Porta Triumphalis became a central part of celebrating a victory. Perhaps to recall and reinforce the act of passing through the Porta Triumphalis, triumphal arches were erected elsewhere in the city. Unfortunately, neither the original Porta Triumphalis nor the subsequent arches built during the Republican period have been preserved, but there is literary evidence of their existence. According to Livy, a Roman historian writing around the time of Jesus' birth, the Roman general Scipio Africanus, having returned victorious from the Second Punic War in 201 BCE, ordered a triumphal arch built on Capitoline Hill. 8 decades later, military commander Quintus Fabius Maximus erected another arch at the eastern end of the Forum to commemorate his victory over the Celtic Allobroges people of southeastern France. During the Republic, the construction of temporary triumphal arches was part of a strategy that used popular celebration and ceremony to promote prominent generals and politicians in the city. These arches were probably made from wood and likely took the form of a freestanding canopy supported on 4 pillars called a baldachin. Although richly decorated, the wooden arches were doomed to destruction at the end of the festivities. An imperial monument. With the advent of the empire, Augustus retained Imperium Maius, or greater power, maybe Maius, or greater power, and became the leader of all generals, which meant generals could no longer erect triumphal arches. This became a privilege reserved exclusively for the imperial family. Given that some colonies were many hundreds of miles away from the capital in Rome, it was a shrewd political move to keep the ambitions of far-flung generals in check by focusing all reference to victories on the emperor himself. Over time, triumphal arches shifted away from being related to the triumphal parades of generals and instead became commemorative monuments glorifying the emperor alone. Having been transformed into a vehicle of imperial propaganda, triumphal arches proliferated not only in Rome, but also across the empire. I'm going to move this wire that's like bumping my shoulder. I feel like it's making little noises. Hold on. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can. It's bothering me. Move that over there. That's much better. Okay. Back to the story. While the triumphal arches of the Republican era were short-lived wooden structures, the commemorative arches of the empire, made from stone and Roman cement, or opus cementitium, were designed to last. The arch itself became deeper, sometimes extending from 15 to nearly 37 feet from front to back. 2 smaller side arches flanking the main arch reinforced the structure and increased the surface area available for reliefs and inscriptions. This decoration was concentrated in the attic section at the top of the arch, which often displayed panels with war scenes depicting weapons taken from the defeated, as well as a sculpture of the victor driving a chariot. The architecture of the arches evolved as the imperial era went on. The few arches that remain from the reign of Augustus, the first emperor, have an austere design and appear somewhat out of proportion. Later, the influence of Hellenistic, Syrian, and Mesopotamian art would lead to a mingling of forms as architects experimented with decoration from various architectural schools. The Arch of Titus achieves a particularly attractive balance. Erected in the year 81 on the Via Sacra, it is the oldest surviving arch in Rome. To the victor goes the arch. Many arches from the Imperial period, like those of the Republican period before it, celebrated a specific military victory. The Arch of Titus was commissioned by Emperor Domitian in the year 81 to commemorate the capture of Jerusalem by his elder brother Titus 11 years earlier. In the years 203 to 205, the Arch of Septimus Severus was erected in the Roman Forum and richly decorated to honor the victory of Severus and his sons over the Parthians in Arabia and Assyria. The Arch of Constantine in Rome, which was built across the Via Triumphalis, close to the Colosseum, between the years 312 and 315, celebrates Constantine's victory at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in the year 312 CE. It stands around 69 feet tall and boasts elaborate decoration, incorporating an attic above the 3 lower spans, housing 8 panels with high reliefs narrating battle scenes. It also has an inscription dedicating the arch to Constantine, who, according to a standard formula, is referred to as the greatest, pious, and blessed Augustus. Sorry, it's very hot in here and I'm sticking to everything to peel myself off every time I move. Constantine didn't hesitate to use spolia, material repurposed from existing monuments, for his arch. Among these pieces are magnificent depictions of Dacian prisoners, which stand almost 10 feet tall. They date to the time of Trajan and probably once graced Trajan's Forum, but were relocated by the 4th century builders of Constantine's arch to adorn the pedestals of his attic. The finished arch is a confection of plinths, moldings, pedestals, spandrels, and friezes that creates an almost Baroque decoration. Civic successes. The commemorative arches of the Imperial period not only celebrated military victories, some also honored civic achievements. The Arch of Augustus in Rimini, for example, marks the restoration of the Via Flaminia. The Arch of Trajan in Beneventum celebrates the completion of the Via Traiana, while Trajan's Arch in Ancona recognizes the expansion of the port there. Other arches were erected as tributes to the imperial dynasty in its farther flung outposts. The Arch of Barra in Tarragona, Spain, was built by a citizen called Lucius Licinius Sura to honor Augustus. During the 2nd century CE, various honorific arches were erected in North Africa, including the Arch of Marcus Aurelius in what is now Tripoli. What remained of these Roman arches captured the imagination of later rulers, from Charles V to Napoleon. Some cities that had no Roman arches built their own in the Roman style. The 1778 Alcalá Gate in Madrid, the 1791 Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, and Napoleon's Arc de Triomphe in Paris have become iconic elements of their modern cityscapes. It is a victory for the Roman Triumphal Arch that the monument's influence survived long after the empire itself. Let's see here, there's a huge diagram about what everything is. Let's just read the basics. We have the booty, the columns, you can see there. The enemy waterways is number 3. Right here. Interesting. The winged victories up here. The prisoners are depicted down here at the bottom. The triumphal chariot is up here. And the dedication. And then an extra battle scene right here. Interesting. Like how each segment is a different part of the war. Like there's the battle, there's the spoils, there's the prisoners, so on and so forth. Interesting. This is the Arch of Septimius Severus in the Roman, or Severus, sorry, in the Roman Forum. This one says Septimius's other arch. This is in the Roman Forum. It says both figures including winged victories, the god Mars, the hero Hercules, and prisoners of war. We know those are located down there. Maybe this is the same arch as the diagram. It seems right. It looks just like it. Seems so. I love the sun coming through it, though. That's such a pretty picture. This is in North Africa. It says in, I guess this is the one in Tripoli I was talked about. Oh, it's in Leptis Magna, which is also in Libya. It says the birthplace of Roman Emperor Septimius Severus. Okay, so this is his first arch, and then that's the other arch, because we're going backwards in the pictures. It's also a pretty photograph. This one's lovely too. The Arch of, how many did he have? I guess this is the same one from the Forum. The Arch of Septimius Severus. To mark his victory over the Parthians. This is the Arch of Titus. It says. Really pretty amidst the modern backdrop there, the old road. Photographers really popped off in this article. Alright, this is a painting depicting the triumph of Titus and Vespasian, showing the victory parade. There's the victors there in the chariot. What is this? An Aureus minted in the reign of Augustus. Shows the emperor atop the triumphal arch. Look at that. And then this first picture here is Constantine's arch, the largest and last surviving triumphal arch. Built in Rome during antiquity, the Arch of Constantine was erected by order of Emperor Constantine from 312 to 315 CE near the Colosseum. It exalts his victory against his rival Maxentius at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. It's really pretty too. Yeah, amazing that these have stood for so long, but given their architecture, they look pretty sturdy. Let's move on to the end of the Roman Empire. Flash forward here to the fall of the Roman Empire. To this article. Legend has it that the Roman state's first ruler was Romulus, the twin brother of Remus, both suckled as babies by a she-wolf. But what historians know for sure is that the Western Roman Empire that grew out of this legendary past, one of the longest lasting empires ever known, collapsed 1200 years later in 476 CE, with the overthrow of its last ruler, who was also named Romulus. It was Romulus Augustulus. The question of why the Western Roman Empire ended has intrigued historians for generations, fueling a debate that is nowhere near reaching a consensus. In 1984, German historian Alexander de Monte drew up a list of more than 200 factors that have been cited to explain Rome's collapse, which previously had been blamed on internal corruption. In his great work, History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Edward Gibbon wrote, "The decline of Rome was the natural and inevitable effect of immoderate greatness. Prosperity ripened the principle of decay. The causes of destruction multiplied with the extent of conquest, and as soon as time or accident had removed the artificial supports, the stupendous fabric yielded to the pressure of its own weight." Other authors have pointed to more specific reasons. Some have focused on the evolution of the Roman economy, which was stagnant by the 3rd century CE because of overdependence on enslaved people for labor. The increasing size of the Roman Empire's bureaucracy and army likely also contributed to its decline. The cost of maintaining them stifled the imperial economy and brought with it an increase in taxes and serious internal corruption. Ongoing military conflicts and civil wars that broke out from the 3rd century onward played a part too, weakening central authority and leading to the fragmentation of the empire, making it more vulnerable to external threats. Environmental shift. In recent years, however, a new theory has emerged highlighting the impact of climatic changes and epidemics. In a work published in 2017, Kyle Harper, a classics professor at the University of Oklahoma, offers an ambitious synthesis on the causes of the empire's decline, in which he argues that the fate of Rome was played out by emperors and barbarians, senators and generals, soldiers and slaves, but it was equally decided by bacteria and viruses, volcanoes and solar cycles. It is a story in which humanity and the environment cannot be separated. Harper and other scholars have drawn on data from climatology and epidemiology, which has opened up new lines of research into the study of the past. Researchers have proposed that the early Roman Empire fell within the period known as the Roman climate optimum, which is believed to have lasted from circa 550 BCE to 150 CE. It was characterized by temperate, stable climatic conditions in much of the Mediterranean. Recent studies paint a more complex picture, but the data suggests that the climatic conditions of the empire in the 1st century BCE favored agricultural, economic, and population growth. First-hand accounts, such as that of the agronomist Columella, indicate that in the 1st century CE, rainfall in central and southern Italy was more frequent in summer than it is today. The sources also reveal that arable lands covered vast areas of North Africa, which have since become desertified. The world grown old. From the mid-3rd century CE, tiny changes in the Earth's tilt reduced levels of solar energy penetrating the atmosphere. This shift impacted the climate, which became more variable with a trend toward cooling and aridity in the Mediterranean. This in turn impacted agricultural productivity, a factor in the multiple crises the Roman Empire underwent in the 3rd century. Eyewitness accounts, such as that of Cyprian, Bishop of Carthage, provide a picture of what was happening. Quote, "The world has now grown old, and it does not abide in that strength in which it formerly stood, nor has it that vigor and force which it formerly possessed. In the winter there is not such an abundance of showers for nourishing the seeds. In the summer the sun has not so much heat for cherishing the harvest, nor in the spring season are the grain fields so joyous, nor are the autumnal seasons so fruitful in their leafy products." End quote. This crisis was compounded by another devastating natural phenomenon, epidemics. To a certain extent, the very success of Roman civilization allowed disease to proliferate in the 3rd century in the way that it did. During the Roman climate optimum, the Roman world experienced remarkable economic and demographic growth and developed a network of densely populated cities. The downside of this connectedness was that contagious diseases found the ideal conditions to spread rapidly. Harper argues that the dense urban habitats, the unflinching transformation of landscapes, the strong networks of connectivity within and especially beyond the empire, all contributed to a unique microbial ecology. During this period, some diseases, including tuberculosis, leprosy, and malaria, spread on a limited scale, while others grew into major epidemics. Previously, these outbreaks had been contained within particular regions and seasons, but from the latter half of the 2nd century onward, epidemics emerged that affected whole swaths of the Roman Empire with unprecedented intensity. Time of epidemics. The Antonine Plague was the first major epidemic to affect the entire Roman Empire from 165 to 180 CE. Originating in the East, this pestilence, the Latin term pestis, and pestilentia were used in antiquity to designate all epidemic diseases, impacted Roman territory in several waves. These waves coincided with the return of legionnaires fighting under Emperor Lucius Verus against the Parthians. There are detailed first-hand accounts of the plague's symptoms and effects from the Greek physician Galen, who was forced to come to Rome from his residence at the Aegean coast to attend Emperor Marcus Aurelius and the Imperial family. The Antonine Plague, believed to be a smallpox epidemic, is estimated to have killed 5 to 10 million people, around 10% of the population. A new outbreak occurred in the middle of the 3rd century with the Cyprian Plague, named after the Bishop of Carthage, Saint Cyprian. In his sermon De Mortalitate, on mortality, he includes a detailed account of the symptoms caused by the illness. Possibly originating in Ethiopia, the plague affected territories including Egypt, the Mediterranean Levant, Asia Minor, Greece, and Italy between 245 and 269 CE. Paulus Orosius, a 5th century Christian historian, framed the event in catastrophic terms. Quote, "A plague now spread over many provinces, and a great pestilence devastated all Italy. Everywhere, country houses, fields, and towns were left without a tiller of the land or an inhabitant, and nothing remained but ruins and forests." End quote. Unexpected recovery. The so-called crisis of the 3rd century did not, however, spell the end of the Roman Empire, which was able to step back from the brink and recover throughout the 4th century. This revitalization tends to be associated with the influence of dynamic emperors such as Constantine the First and Theodosius I. However, researchers are increasingly looking to the beneficial climatic changes experienced during the 4th century to explain how the Roman Empire was able to recover during this period. Kyle Harper suggests that the generally favorable change in climatic conditions experienced in the 4th century was connected to the phenomenon known as the North Atlantic Oscillation, a fluctuation between areas of high and low atmospheric pressure that caused a significant increase in precipitation on the continent. However, the weather also became more variable, explaining the frequency of major droughts and famines recorded in the area of the Mediterranean. One example is the famines suffered by the province of Cappadocia, which is in the center of present-day Turkey, in 368 CE and 369. Basil the Great, Bishop of Caesarea, starting from 370, dedicated sermons to the topic, warning that human sinfulness had provoked the famine and urging people to care for the poorest. As a good person, redistribute your surplus to the needy, he told his flock. Climate refugees. The greatest impact of climatic changes occurred beyond the borders of the Roman Empire. A prolonged period of drought across the Eurasian steppe, from the Hungarian plains to Mongolia, directly affected the lives of nomadic herders. This was when the Huns began to progress westward across the Eurasian steppe and started to appear in written sources. It has been argued that the Huns, faced with an environmental crisis, became climate refugees in search of new pastures. As they moved west, they forced other nomadic peoples from the north toward the lands of the Roman Empire. It now seems certain that epidemics and droughts were a notable factor in the process that led to the definitive fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE. Our understanding of precise climatic conditions from that time remains incomplete, especially across a region as vast as the Roman Empire. It is crucial to avoid deterministic conclusions. History cannot be explained simply by a variation in temperature or rainfall, or by the outbreak of plagues, however deadly they may be. Nevertheless, varying evidence points to the fact that climatic factors did have a real impact. As Harper argues, the outcome of the Roman Empire is an example of the uncanny power of nature in the fate of civilization. Let's see. One more thing here about the plague of Cyprian. Look at this painting. The angel of death right there. There's people suffering and dying there. Yeah, we won't read this today. Also interesting here, I think, because we don't know what it was, but maybe it was Ebola, a type of Ebola at least. We don't know. We probably never know. This is in Ravenna, which was the last capital of the Western Roman Empire. Really pretty there. The Basilica of San Vitale. There's Attila the Hun. This is a coin showing Romulus Augustulus, the last emperor of Rome. Look at this. Built by Emperor Aurelian, its defensive ramparts surrounding Rome held symbolic power, plagues, invasions, and economic turmoil caused severe crises for Rome in the 3rd century. A great administrator and soldier, Aurelian managed to turn the tide, restoring Rome's imperial fortunes for the time being. This is the Roman Forum. Yep, just the forum here in Rome. There's a mouse. Or the gerbil, apparently. Not a mouse at all, a gerbil. Look at his little tail, his little arms. Let's see. Let's read this. It says, advances in paleopathology and paleomicrobiology have enabled historians to better understand the evolution of diseases from the past. Scholars now identify the Antonine Plague as an outbreak of smallpox that probably began in Seleucia, which today is in Iraq, the capital of the Parthian Empire, which was at war with the Romans, blah, 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 transmitting from a gerbil to a human. Wow. Let's see. Road here. It says, talking here about how epidemics would travel around roads such as these. There's a big bath. People are getting clean, but also probably spreading disease. Let's see. I'm reading this. Sorry, I should read it to you. This cameo likely shows the capture of Emperor Valerian by the Sasanian king Shapur I at Edessa in modern-day Turkey in the year 260. Shapur's victory was facilitated by the Cyprian plague that weakened Valerian's forces. This is in the National Library of France in Paris. There's Palmyra. Very easy to identify. The columns there. I should be reading this to you instead of just me reading it. A Roman colony when the Antonine Plague broke out. There's some barbarians here, the Huns in particular, invading. Some agriculture happening here. Look at this beautiful mosaic showing some more farming. Got plowing and dropping the seeds there in the newly plowed soil. This is the Villa dei Quintili near Rome. Fell to ruins. Decline of the empire. There's Marcus Aurelius down there. And then this beautiful photo here of the forum. It's a really pretty picture. But we're going to end tonight, not in Rome, but in Rimini, talking about this archaeological site. The surgeon's house in Rimini, inside a Roman clinic. Workers were hardly surprised when they stumbled upon ancient ruins in the Italian town of Rimini in 1989. Now a popular tourist destination along the Adriatic coast, Rimini, or Ariminum in ancient times, had been a major Roman town for centuries, and the modern city is strewn with monuments from that period. What the workers found that spring day, however, would lead archaeologists to something quite unique, a cache of surgical instruments that had lain undisturbed in a Roman surgeon's clinic for centuries, offering tantalizing new details about the practice of medicine in the classical world. An everyday marvel. Workers were busy landscaping the public gardens of the Piazza Ferrari, the city's central square, when they noticed fragments of stucco caught up in the roots of a tree. The City Museum of Rimini confirmed the fragments were Roman, and a team of archaeologists moved in to carry out probes on site. These revealed the remains of a cluster of well-to-do but otherwise ordinary houses, a discovery that promised to shed new light on everyday life in Ariminum. Once part of the Etruscan civilization of northern Italy, Ariminum was conquered by the Roman Republic and given its Latin name in 268 BCE. Already an important port, it later stood at the junction of the Via Aemilia, the highway linking the eastern coast to the northern part of the Italian peninsula, and the Via Flaminia, which was the road to Rome. This vital harbor and transport hub acquired impressive and long-lasting infrastructure that is still visible today. Sections of the old city wall, the Triumphal Arch of Augustus, we already talked about, erected in 27 BCE, marking the starting point of the Via Flaminia, and the marble splendor of the Tiberius Bridge, completed around the year 21 CE. From these, historians had a good idea of Ariminum's place in the Roman world, but they knew less about what day-to-day life was like there. The 1989 discovery would change that. The archaeologists expanded the area of investigation and began a series of annual excavation campaigns that lasted until 1997. In total, they excavated a site of about 7,500 square feet, uncovering remains from a range of periods, spanning from the Imperial Roman era to the later Byzantine period. The site included part of the 1st century city wall and 3 houses. The oldest of these houses was Roman, occupied until the 3rd century. The 2nd and 3rd houses were Byzantine. Doctor in the house. What caught the attention of archaeologists most was the first of these houses, which had been rebuilt several times over the years. The last reconstruction took place during the second half of the 2nd century CE, when the main rooms were remodeled to include rich mosaics and paintings, and new rooms were added. Archaeologists were able to identify the areas of a typical Roman mansion: the vestibule, the triclinium, where banquets, receptions, and social gatherings were held, several cubicula, which were rooms usually identified as bedrooms that also served as reading or meeting rooms, and a latrine. They also found remains of a richly decorated upper floor comprising several rooms, including a kitchen. But what made this particular Roman house so special were the belongings of the person who lived there in the early 3rd century. A spectacular array of some 150 surgical instruments made of bronze and iron and manufactured between the 1st and 3rd centuries CE were found among the remains. This was clearly the home of a Roman surgeon. The tools, which would once have been stored in cases and boxes, form the most complete set of surgical instruments ever found from the ancient Roman world. The archaeologists also found mortars that must have been used in the preparation and storing of drugs. The evidence suggests that the house functioned as a private clinic or taberna medica of the early 3rd century, containing both study space and a medical consulting room. They dubbed it the Domus del Chirurgo, the surgeon's house. A good man. At the heart of this taberna medica was a room paved with a mosaic depicting the mythical Greek hero Orpheus. In this room, archaeologists discovered most of these surgical instruments. They also found medical paraphernalia in the cubiculum next to the Orpheus room and in the entranceway. Hide the ad there. And it was there on a wall that archaeologists found an intriguing graffiti. The inscription in Latin read, Eutices homo bonus hic habitat hic sunt miseri. This translates as Eutyches, A good man lives here. Here are the miserable ones. It seems reasonable to hypothesize that the text was scratched onto the wall by a sick person being treated by a doctor called Eutyches. Researchers believe that the doctor trained in Greece and Asia Minor, where, in addition to gaining medical knowledge, he acquired cultural artifacts that he took with him to his residence in Ariminum. This would explain the presence of objects outside the city's typical trading circles. These include a panel of fish in glass paste thought to be from what is now Turkey, a bronze votive hand associated with the cult of Jupiter Dolichinas, and a statue of Hermarchus, a Greek Epicurean philosopher. The sophisticated surgical instruments found in the house suggest that Eutyches, if that was indeed his name, had specialized in treating trauma wounds and performing surgery. It is therefore likely that he acquired at least part of his training as a military doctor in the camps and on the battlefields of the Roman Empire. An abrupt end. To the mid to late 3rd century, fire razed the surgeon's house, along with much of northern Ariminum. Ancient authors record that during the reign of Emperor Gallienus, Germanic tribes made incursions into the Italian peninsula, so the fire at Ariminum may have been the results of confrontation with these invaders. Weapons at the site dating to that period strengthen this hypothesis. The roof of the house collapsed and the adobe walls fell in, burying the interior under a layer of rubble. The city of Rimini came under Byzantine and Frankish control, and it was fought over during the Italian civil wars of the Renaissance. Despite these upheavals, the rubble layer kept the surgical time capsule intact for almost 2,000 years. Since 2007, the public has been able to visit the surgeon's house. Together with the Great Arch and Bridge, it's now counted among Rimini's greatest Roman treasures. So here we can see some of his tools, hooks and scalpels. We have this beautiful photo here of the bridge. It's also a very lovely photograph, isn't it? So pretty. It's a reconstruction of the consulting room in the surgeon's house. You can come here and see what it most likely once looked like. Here's the glass panel of the fish from Turkey. Pretty cool. And this is the mosaic of Orpheus, which isn't this the same as... Yes, it is. I guess that's the actual one there. Pretty cool. And look, they would use this fake foot. It says it's terracotta as a therapeutic heat treatment because they'd put good stuff in there. Ointments and medicines. You put your foot in there and have a foot soak, I guess. Pretty cool. But that's where we're going to end tonight. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to pick future magazine articles, which you can if you become a member right now, which again, the join button is just down there or the first link in the description box. You can still vote on articles that I've listed that I haven't read yet. So if you want your name in the next video, you can absolutely do that. I'd love to have you join the membership. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have